The notification lit up his phone screen right as he raised his champagne glass. She doesn't know about us. The text read, "He thought I was just the silent wife in the background." Quietly, I unlocked his device and snapped a photo of the classified file sitting on the table, the one with his signature on a dead patient's chart. I sent it to her. 3 seconds later, across the crowded restaurant, her face went ghost white. My name is Zara Cruz, and at 37 years old, I had become an expert in the art of invisibility. It was a strange skill for a woman with my heritage, given the fire my mother always said ran in our blood. But in the pristine, manicured world of Maple Crest, fire was considered a liability. Here, in this sprawling suburb of beige stucco and emerald lawns, I was not defined by my past as a sharp-tongued investigative journalism student or my current title as a senior clinical data compliance analyst. I was defined by the man whose arm I held. I was Mrs. Dr. Lucas Hart, to the outside world, specifically the tight-knit medical community surrounding the Riverstone Hart Pavilion. We were the gold standard, the Hart family. We were the image they put on the brochures for fundraising galas. We lived in a 4-bedroom colonial with a heated saltwater pool in the backyard and a driveway occupied by a pristine, lease-new luxury SUV. If you walked down the main corridor of the hospital, you would see a framed photograph of us near the donor wall. In it, Lucas looks dashing in his white coat, smiling with that easy, confident charm that melts elderly patients and secures 6-figure grants. I am standing slightly behind him, wearing a tasteful navy dress, with our children, 11-year-old Ava and 7-year-old Nico, pressed against my legs. We looked like a stock photo for the American dream. The reality, however, was less like a photograph and more like a silent film where the audio had been cut years ago. My mornings usually began before the sun rose. I would stand in our kitchen, a cavernous space of white marble and stainless steel that always felt slightly too cold. No matter how high I turned up the thermostat, I made coffee, the strong kind, and reviewed the family calendar on my tablet. This was my primary role. I was the architect of Lucas's life, the unseen force that ensured his socks were paired, his ties were silk, and his schedule was free of friction. I remember a specific morning last week. Lucas came down the stairs, smelling of expensive cedarwood soap and the crisp starch of his dress shirt. He was handsome, undeniably so, with the kind of graying temples that only added authority to his face. I reached out automatically to straighten his tie, a reflex honed over 12 years of marriage. He didn't look at me. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through emails with a thumb that moved with surgical precision. "You have the board meeting at Novus Meridian Biotech at 9, I said, smoothing the fabric against his chest. "And don't forget the consultation with the VIP patient from the senator's office at 2. He hummed a response, eyes never leaving the screen. "Thanks. Z." That was it. Z. Not honey, not darling. Just a letter. I watched him grab his travel mug and head for the door. He paused only to check his reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting his expression into the mask of the benevolent healer. Everyone told me I was lucky. At parties, other wives would corner me near the buffet, clutching glasses of Chardonnay, and gush about him. "Lucas is a saint," they would say. "He saved my father. He saved my husband. You must be so proud." And then came the inevitable kicker. Usually delivered by a senior administrator or a wealthy donor, he couldn't do it without you. "Zara, you are the rock. I was the rock. But rocks are things you step on to get somewhere higher." I tried to rationalize the distance. I told myself this was the price of greatness. Lucas was a star cardiologist and the principal investigator for the groundbreaking Aegis Flow heart device trials at Novus Meridian Biotech. He dealt with life and death. He held human hearts in his hands. It was natural that when he came home, he had nothing left to give. I had accepted this bargain years ago. I had walked away from a promising career in journalism, burying my instinct to question and investigate, so I could work a stable, quiet corporate job at Novus Meridian to support us while he finished his fellowship. Now, I spent my days analyzing compliance spreadsheets, ensuring that every clinical trial followed federal regulations, while he basked in the glory of the results. But the silence in our house was changing. It wasn't just the exhaustion of a busy doctor anymore. It was a frequency I couldn't quite tune out, like the high-pitched whine of a dying fluorescent light. It was the phone. It never left his hand. Even when he was home, ostensibly off duty, the device was a physical extension of his palm. If I walked into the room, he would angle the screen away, not quickly, not with the panic of a teenager, but with a casual but practiced motion. Dinner had become a logistics meeting. We would sit at the long mahogany table, the kids chattering about soccer practice or spelling tests, and Lucas would nod at the appropriate intervals. But his mind was elsewhere. He was on call. He would say, "Always on call. The hospital needs me. The lab needs me." I tried to talk to Naomi Blake about it. Naomi was my oldest friend, a nurse practitioner at a different clinic who had 0 patients for the hero worship doctors received. We met for lunch at a salad place near my office, and I made the mistake of complaining that Lucas had missed 3 family movie nights in a row. He has a god complex. Zara, Naomi said, stabbing a cherry tomato with her fork. It happens to all of them eventually. They start believing their own press releases. They think the rules of normal human decency don't apply to them because they can stitch a valve. I laughed it off. "You are too cynical." I said, "He is just under pressure with the new trial data." Naomi looked at me, her expression softening into something like pity. "Just make sure he remembers he is a husband and a father, not just a deity in a white coat." I drove home that afternoon feeling a knot of irritation. Naomi didn't understand. She didn't know the weight he carried. I picked the kids up from school, parking the SUV in the long line of idling cars. While I waited, I opened my laptop on the passenger seat. As a compliance analyst, my job was to hunt for discrepancies in data logs, to ensure that Novus Meridian Biotech wasn't cutting corners. It was tedious, unglamorous work. I was scanning a spreadsheet of patient consent forms when a segment came on the radio. It was an investigative report about medical fraud, about doctors who fudged data to fast-track devices for stock market gains. My stomach turned. I reached out and snapped the radio off. I sat there in the silence, watching the other mothers chat through rolled-down windows. I did not want to hear it. I did not want to let my old journalist brain start asking questions about my own husband's industry. I was part of the team. I was the wife. I was safe. But the safety felt fragile. The cracks were small, almost invisible. But I felt them. The most jarring moment happened 2 nights ago, after the annual hospital gala. I had spent 3 weeks organizing the silent auction, ensuring every detail was perfect. I had dressed in a gown I knew Lucas liked, a sleek emerald silk that complemented his tie. I smiled until my cheeks ached. I had played the part of the adoring wife perfectly. In the car on the way home, the adrenaline faded, leaving me hollow. I looked out the window at the passing streetlights. I think I blinked in the photo with the mayor. I said quietly, "I hope they can fix it." Lucas didn't look over. He was driving with one hand, the other resting near his phone in the cup holder. "You are becoming too sensitive, Zara." I turned to him, surprised. "What? You looked anxious all night," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "You were fidgeting. It ruins the aesthetic." "Zara, people look at you and they think something is wrong. You need to be smoother." The comment hit me like a physical slap. It wasn't that he was angry. It was that he viewed my emotions as a flaw in his public relations strategy. I was a prop that was malfunctioning. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just turned back to the window and watched our reflection in the glass. 2 ghosts traveling at 60 miles per hour. That night, after we got home, Lucas went straight to his study, claiming he had charts to review. I stood alone in the kitchen. The house was perfectly silent. The stainless steel appliances gleamed under the recessed lighting. Everything was spotless. Everything was expensive. Everything was cold. I looked into the living room, where a large framed photo of us from a beach vacation hung above the fireplace. In the picture, we were laughing. The sun was bright. We looked unbreakable. I stood there, gripping the edge of the marble counter until my knuckles turned white. A terrifying, quiet thought bloomed in the back of my mind. A thought I had pushed down for months. If this frame breaks, I thought, staring at our smiling faces, will I be the last person to know I turned off the lights, plunging the perfect house into darkness, and walked upstairs to a bed that felt miles wide. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of ordinary, gray Tuesday that usually blends into the fabric of a week without leaving a mark. The kitchen was filled with the chaotic symphony of our morning routine. 7-year-old Nico was arguing loudly about wearing his blue sneakers instead of the black ones, and 11-year-old Eva was complaining that we were out of the specific brand of almond milk she liked. I was standing at the island, chopping strawberries for oatmeal, my hands moving with the mechanical efficiency of a woman who has done this 2,000 times before. Lucas came rushing into the kitchen, a blur of motion in his navy scrubs. He grabbed a protein bar from the basket, kissed the top of my head without looking at me, and muttered something about a complex valve replacement scheduled for 8 o'clock. "I need to shower," he said, his voice tight with that familiar pre-surgery adrenaline. "I will be down in 10 minutes. Get the kids to the bus." Okay. He turned and took the stairs 2 at a time. I heard the heavy thud of the master bathroom door closing upstairs, followed by the hiss of the shower. I turned back to the counter to wipe down a spill of oat milk. That was when I saw it. His phone. It was sitting face up on the marble countertop, right next to the fruit bowl. It was a sleek, black slab of glass and metal, the object that usually lived in his pocket or glued to his palm. He never left it behind, but he had been distracted today, his mind already in the operating room. I hesitated. I had never been a snooping wife. I prided myself on that. I respected his privacy because I trusted his integrity. But we had been distant lately, a cold front moving through the house that I could not seem to warm up. I had been planning a surprise, a weekend trip to a beach house in the Hamptons next month. Just the 4 of us. I needed to check his digital calendar to make sure he was not speaking at a conference on those specific dates. It was an innocent impulse, a logistical check. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and reached for the device. Just as my fingertips brushed the cold glass, the screen lit up. It was not a calendar notification. It was a message from an unsaved number, but the contact name popped up from an associated profile, Lila Monroe. I froze. I knew that name. Lila Monroe was the director of digital communications at Novus Meridian Biotech. She was 28, brilliant, and managed the public image of the very trials Lucas was leading. I had met her once at a company mixer. She had shaken my hand with a firm, dry grip and told me I had lovely skin. The message on the screen was short. "Last night was insane. She doesn't know about us." There was a smirk emoji at the end of the sentence. I did not gasp. I did not drop the phone. I did not scream. The reaction was biological, immediate, and terrifyingly silent. It was as if someone had reached into my chest and turned off the main power switch. The sounds of the kitchen, Eva shouting at Nico to give back her iPad, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren suddenly sounded like they were coming from underwater. My heart stopped beating in a rhythm I recognized. It was a thudding, painful spasm against my ribs. "She doesn't know about us." I stared at the words. The timestamp said 7:14 in the morning. My thumb hovered over the screen. I told myself to put it down. I told myself to misunderstand it. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe they were talking about a surprise party. Maybe us meant the team. Maybe she meant the FDA. But my thumb moved on its own. I swiped up. He had not changed his passcode. It was still the year we were married. The Messages app opened, and the thread with Lila Monroe filled the screen. It was not a misunderstanding. I scrolled up. My eyes scanned the text, not reading every word, but absorbing the shape of the betrayal. It was a digital archive of a life I did not know existed. There were hundreds of messages. There were photos of dinner receipts from steakhouses in the city. Dated nights when Lucas told me he was presenting at a board meeting. There were selfies of them in an elevator I did not recognize, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. There was a photo of a hotel room keycard on a nightstand. Next to his watch, the vintage Omega I had bought him for his 40th birthday. But it was the text that cut deeper than the images. The images were just evidence of the act. The texts were evidence of the cruelty. Scroll. Lila. I almost laughed when you mentioned your wife was organizing the charity auction. Does she actually enjoy that suburban housewife cosplay, Lucas? It keeps her busy. She needs projects. Otherwise, she starts asking questions about my schedule. Scroll. Lila. Do you think she suspects Lucas numbered Zara is comfortable? She likes life. She's not looking for cracks in the foundation. She thinks I am on call tonight. Cute. Right scroll. Lila. You are bad. Dr. Hart. Lucas. Only for you. Zara is probably checking data tables for me right now. She is good at the boring stuff. I stopped scrolling. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. Cold and violent. They were not just sleeping together. They were laughing at me. They had built a little world where I was the punchline, the boring, oblivious administrator who kept the spreadsheets clean so they could play in the mud. The sound of footsteps on the stairs snapped me back to reality. Lucas was coming down. Panic, sharp and electric, shot through my veins. I could not let him know. Not yet. I did not know why. But instinct took over. If I confronted him now, he would spin it. He would lie. He would gaslight me until I believed I was the crazy one. I pressed the side button, locking the screen. I placed the phone back on the marble counter, exactly 2 inches from the fruit bowl, precisely where he had left it. I turned back to the oatmeal. My hands were shaking, so I gripped the edge of the bowl until my knuckles turned white. The kitchen door swung open. Lucas walked in, hair wet and combed back, smelling of peppermint and deceit. "Hey," he said, grabbing his phone and sliding it into his pocket without even looking at it. "Did you see my keys?" I forced my lungs to expand. I forced my vocal cords to vibrate. "They are by the espresso machine," I said. My voice sounded flat, metallic, but steady. "Thanks," he said. He grabbed the keys and leaned in to kiss my cheek. I did not flinch. I let his lips touch my skin. It felt like being branded with ice. "Have a good surgery," I said. He smiled that winning, charismatic smile that charmed donors and patients and, apparently, directors of digital communications. "Always," he said. "See you tonight. Don't wait up." I watched him walk out the back door. I watched him get into his car. I watched him back out of the driveway. I turned to the kids. "Shoes," I said. "Bus, now." I ushered them out the door, fixing a collar, tying a lace, and checking a backpack. I waved as the yellow bus rumbled away down the tree-lined street. I smiled at the neighbor across the road who was walking her golden retriever. The moment the front door clicked shut, the silence of the house crashed down on me. I ran. I bolted for the powder room off the hallway, barely making it to the sink before my stomach revolted. I dry heaved over the porcelain, my body trying to purge a poison that was not in my stomach but in my life. Nothing came up but bile and acid. I gripped the cold edges of the sink, looking at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and dark. I looked like a stranger. "She doesn't know about us." The words echoed in the small tiled room. They bounced off the expensive wallpaper. "She doesn't know about us." He thought I was stupid. He thought I was comfortable. He thought I was just the woman who checked the data tables. I washed my face with freezing cold water. I scrubbed my skin until it was red. I needed to be clean. I needed to be sharp. I spent the rest of the day in a fugue state. I went to work at Novus Meridian. I sat at my desk. I opened my compliance software. I stared at the rows of numbers. Every time I saw a name on a file, I wondered if Lucas had lied to them too. I saw Lila Monroe in the hallway near the elevator bank around 2 in the afternoon. She was wearing a cream-colored suit, laughing with a colleague. She looked radiant. She looked happy. She looked at me and smiled. A polite professional nod. "Hi, Zara," she said. "Hi, Lila," I replied. I walked past her, feeling the phantom weight of her text message in my pocket. That night, the house felt like a museum. Lucas came home late, around 9. He smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion. He ate the dinner I had left in the microwave without commenting on the taste. We went up to bed. The bedroom was dark, illuminated only by the blue glow of the streetlights filtering through the sheer curtains. I lay on my side, staring at the wall. I could hear his breathing behind me. It was slow, rhythmic, and peaceful. The breathing of a man with a clear conscience, or no conscience at all. I rolled over. I needed to know one last thing. I needed to know if there was anything left of the man I had married 12 years ago. I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder. I let my fingers trail down his arm. "Lucas," I whispered. He stiffened. He did not turn around. He pulled his arm away, shifting his body to the edge of the mattress, putting distance between us. "Not tonight." "Z," he mumbled into his pillow. "I am wiped. Those stents were a nightmare today. Complex anatomy. My head is pounding." He was lying. I knew his schedule. The stents were routine. He had done them 1,000 times. "Okay," I said. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand, clutching it against his chest like a teddy bear, and curled into a fetal position away from me. I rolled back onto my side. I stared up at the ceiling. There was a tiny hairline crack in the plaster near the crown molding, a spiderweb fracture that I had been meaning to call the contractor about for months. I traced the shape of it with my eyes. It looked like a map of a broken country. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the silence of the house, the silence of my marriage, what I could not see, but what existed in the invisible digital space between us, was the screen of the phone he was holding against his heart. The screen lit up with a final notification for the night. Lila Monroe. "Sleep tight, Dr. Hart. Can't wait for when she's out of the picture." I closed my eyes and counted the cracks. 1, 2, 3. I was not the one who was going to be out of the picture. For 3 days. I held the silence in my mouth like a stone. I did not scream. I did not throw the expensive china against the wall. I watched him. I watched Lucas move through our house with the arrogance of a man who believes he is the narrator of everyone else's story. I watched him text her under the dinner table, his thumb tapping out secrets while he asked Nico about his spelling test. I was not just a wife anymore. I was a journalist again, observing a subject, waiting for the moment the mask would slip. But Lucas, efficient as always, decided to expedite the schedule. It was Friday evening. The children were asleep upstairs, exhausted after a week of school and soccer. The house was quiet, the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet that precedes a storm. I was in the living room, folding a basket of laundry, when Lucas walked in. He was not wearing his scrubs. He was dressed in casual cashmere, holding a glass of single malt scotch. He did not offer me one. He sat down in the leather armchair opposite the sofa, took a sip of the amber liquid, and looked at me. There was no warmth in his eyes, only a clinical detachment, the same look he gave patients when he had to tell them their prognosis was poor but manageable. "I think we need to talk about the future," he said. I stopped folding a pair of Eva's jeans. I smoothed the denim over my knee, feeling the rough fabric against my skin. "The future," I repeated. "Divorce," he said. He dropped the word into the space between us like a scalpel onto a metal tray. It was clean, sharp, and sterile. I looked at him. I expected to feel devastating grief, but instead, my mind clicked into a different gear. I was analyzing his posture, his tone, and the speed of his speech. "I have given this marriage 12 years. Zara," he continued, swirling his drink. "And they were good years. Mostly. But people evolve at different rates. I am at the peak of my career right now. The Aegis Flow trials, the department head position, the speaking tours. It requires a level of energy and focus that well. Let's be honest, our lives are not aligned anymore." He paused, waiting for me to cry. When I didn't, he pressed on. "I need a partner who understands that world, someone who is in the trenches with me. You have built a nice life here, Zara, a domestic life, but it is heavy. It slows me down." He was calling me an anchor, not the kind that keeps a ship safe, but the kind that drags it to the bottom. "So," I said, keeping my voice level. "You are firing me." He sighed, an impatient puff of air. "Don't be dramatic. I am trying to do this civilly. I have drawn up some preliminary thoughts. We sell the house. The market is high right now. We will get a good price. We split the equity 60-40. You take the kids. I will take a condo in the city, closer to Novus Meridian. I will pay generous child support and alimony for 5 years. Enough to get you back on your feet. Maybe you can go back to school or whatever it is you want to do." It sounded rehearsed. It sounded like a pitch he had practiced in the mirror, or more likely, in bed with her. I listened to the numbers. They were large, attractive numbers, but my brain, trained to look for what was missing in a spreadsheet, spotted the holes immediately. "What about your equity in the firm?" I asked. "What about the performance bonuses from the Aegis Flow trials and the stock options from Novus Meridian?" Lucas stiffened. His hand tightened around the glass. "That is separate property," he said quickly. "Those are tied to my professional performance. They are complex financial instruments. Zara, you wouldn't understand how they are structured. They are not liquid assets. I understand that stock options vest." "Lucas," I said, "I understand that clinical trial bonuses are substantial. And I understand that since we are married, half of that belongs to this family." He stood up then, pacing to the fireplace. He looked agitated, not like a man leaving a loveless marriage, but like a man trying to flee a burning building before the alarms went off. "You are being greedy," he snapped. "I am offering you a clean break, a fresh start. Don't drag this out by trying to audit my career." He was running. I could smell it. It wasn't just an affair. Men leave wives for mistresses every day. They don't usually try to liquidate their assets and hide their portfolios with this level of desperation unless there is something else. I stood up too, facing him. "Is it Lila?" I asked. The name hung in the air. He stopped pacing. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of surprise, but it was quickly replaced by that arrogant resolve. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't apologize. He simply nodded. "Once. She understands the pressure," he said. "She is vital to what I am doing. We speak the same language." "And what language is that?" I asked. "Deceit." He scoffed. "You will be fine. Zara, you are strong. You always have been. You don't need me holding your hand." Then he turned, his eyes narrowing, and the knife twisted. "Honestly, it is probably better for you, too. You have been unstable lately." I blinked. "Unstable." "Don't act like you don't know what I mean," he said, his voice dropping to a faux sympathetic register that made my skin crawl. "You are paranoid. You are controlling. Remember the audit 3 years ago? You had a panic attack in the hallway. You were hyperventilating because of a paperwork error. You spiral. Zara, you get obsessed with details that don't matter." I felt the blood drain from my face. The audit he was referring to had been a massive compliance breach that I had caught just in time to save the department. But the stress had indeed caused me to have a severe anxiety episode. I had cried in his arms that night. I had told him I felt like I was drowning. I had trusted him with my vulnerability. Now, he was digging it up, polishing it, and turning it into a weapon. "I have spoken to colleagues," he continued, casually. "They have noticed it too. The obsession, the anxiety. If we have to go to court for custody, Zara, I have a duty to protect Ava and Nico. I don't want to bring up your mental health history, but if you fight me on the finances, if you try to make this ugly, I will have to tell the truth about how volatile you can be." My hands were shaking, but I hid them behind my back. He was not just leaving me. He was laying the groundwork to destroy my credibility. He was gaslighting me, rewriting our history to make me look like a hysterical woman who couldn't be trusted with a checkbook, let alone her children. "I am going to bed," I said, because if I stayed there 1 second longer, I would have clawed his eyes out. "You do that," he said, taking a sip of his scotch. "Get some rest. You look tired." The next morning, Saturday, the house was bright and deceptively cheerful. Lucas was gone before I came downstairs. On the kitchen island, right next to the coffee maker where I couldn't miss it, sat a heavy cream-colored business card. Hunter Pike, Attorneys at Law. I turned it over. On the back, in Lucas's sharp, angular handwriting, was a note. They will help you. Don't make this hard. He was offering to pay for my lawyer. He wanted to control both sides of the chessboard. He wanted me to hire someone he approved of. Someone who would tell me his offer was generous and I should sign quickly. I threw the card into the recycling bin. I spent the morning cleaning. It was a nervous habit, a way to exert control over my environment when my life was spinning off its axis. I stripped the beds, vacuumed the rugs, and finally gathered the laundry. I went into our bedroom and picked up the navy blazer and the white lab coat Lucas had thrown over the chair the night before. He usually left his coats at the hospital, but he had brought this one home, claiming it needed a specific stain treatment. I checked the pockets. It was automatic. Tissues, gum wrappers, loose change. My hand brushed against something thick in the inside pocket of the lab coat. I pulled it out. It was a standard manila envelope, folded in half to fit. There was no name on the outside. I sat on the edge of the unmade bed and opened it. Inside was a stack of computer printouts. They were system logs from the Novus Meridian Biotech Clinical Database. My eyes scanned the columns, my breath catching in my throat. User Z Cruz, Access Level 4 Admin, Action Modified Data Field, Subject 8904, Action Modified Data Field, Subject 89Wailu, Action Delete Entry, Adverse Event Log. I stared at the timestamps. October 14th, 2:15 in the afternoon, November 2nd, 9:30 in the morning, November 10th, 11:45 at night. My heart hammered against my ribs. I remembered October 14th. It was a Tuesday. At 2:15 in the afternoon, I was standing in the pickup line at Eva's middle school, waiting for dismissal. I remembered it distinctly because it was pouring rain and the wipers on the minivan were stuck. November 2nd, 9:30 in the morning, I was at the dentist with Nico for a cavity filling. November 10th, 11:45 at night, I was in bed, asleep, exhausted after the fall festival. Someone had been logging into the secure clinical database using my credentials. Someone had been altering patient data, deleting adverse events medical speak for complications, injuries, or deaths, and that someone had folded these logs and tucked them into his pocket, keeping them close. I looked at the papers trembling in my hands. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a divorce. Lucas wasn't just trying to get rid of a wife he found boring. He was building a paper trail. If anyone looked at these logs, the FDA, the internal auditors, the police, they would see Zara Cruz, the anxious, unstable compliance analyst, logging in at odd hours to tamper with the trial data. Lucas wasn't just leaving me. He was planning to send me to prison in his place. I shoved the papers back into the envelope and hid it under my mattress, my hands shaking so hard I could barely lift the heavy luxury bedding. Downstairs, the front door opened, and I heard Lucas's voice calling out to the kids, cheerful and bright, the sound of a man who thought he had tied up all his loose ends. He had no idea that the loose end was upstairs, wide awake, and finally realizing that I wasn't the one who was unstable. I was the one who was being set up. I did not call the number on the cream-colored business card Lucas had left on the kitchen counter. I knew exactly who Hunter and Pike were. They were a boutique firm known for aggressive litigation and for burying wives under mountains of motions until they signed away their dignity for a fraction of what they were owed. Instead, I called Cassandra Pike. She was the Pike in the name, the estranged sister of the partner Lucas had recommended, and she had left the firm 5 years ago to start her own practice, specifically to destroy men like my husband. Her office was in a glass tower downtown, 40 floors above the street. It smelled of expensive espresso and old leather. Cassandra was a sharp woman in her 50s with silver hair cut into a severe bob and eyes that looked like they had seen every variation of human greed. She did not offer me tea or sympathy. She offered me a legal pad and a pen. "I need paper." "Zara," she said, her voice rasping slightly, like dry leaves. "I do not care about his speeches. I do not care about the affair. Not legally speaking. In this state, infidelity does not move the needle much on asset division, but money does. If he is hiding it, I need to find it. Bring me everything: bank statements, tax returns for the last 7 years, stock option grants, the deed to the house, the lease on the SUV, anything with a signature. That night, the house was silent. Lucas was staying at a hotel near the hospital, claiming he needed focus for a grant proposal. But I knew he was with Lila. The children were asleep. I went into his study, a room lined with mahogany bookshelves that were mostly for show. The safe was behind a painting of a sailboat we had bought in Nantucket. I spun the dial. The combination was his birthday. It was always his birthday. The heavy metal door swung open with a quiet click. I pulled out the stack of files, my heart beating a steady, cold rhythm against my ribs. I was not a thief. I was a data analyst conducting an audit. That was how I had to frame it to keep my hands from shaking. I took the documents to the kitchen island and turned on the bright overhead lights. I laid them out like a forensic pathologist arranging bones. There were the usual things: retirement accounts, the mortgage, the children's college funds. But tucked in the back of a folder labeled insurance policies was a bank statement I did not recognize. It was for an entity called Heartline Consulting LLC. I had never heard of it. I scanned the transaction history. The numbers were staggering. There were incoming wire transfers of $20,000, $40,000, sometimes $65,000 at a time. The dates were irregular, but the total for the last fiscal year was over $400,000. I traced the origin of the funds: Novus Meridian Biotech. That made no sense. Lucas was a salaried employee. He received a paycheck, a bonus, and stock options. Why was the company wiring nearly $500,000 to a separate consulting firm registered to our home address? Then I saw another name in the deposit column: Cardioxin Dynamics. I froze. Cardioxin was a direct competitor to Novus. They manufactured the stents that Lucas used when he wasn't implanting the Aegis Flow device. I looked at the outgoing transfers. The money did not stay in the Heartline account for long. Within 48 hours of every deposit, the funds were wired out to a bank in the Bahamas. The account holder was listed simply as LH Holdings. I took photos of every page. I felt a cold sweat pricking at the back of my neck. This was not just hiding assets from a divorce settlement. This was kickbacks. This was consulting fees for influence. This was illegal. I met Cassandra again 2 days later. I slid the printed photos across her desk. She put on her reading glasses and studied them for a long time. The silence in the room was thick. "Well," she said finally, taking off her glasses, "this changes the landscape." "Is it leverage?" I asked. "It is a nuclear bomb," she corrected. "This is not legitimate income." "Zara, if he is taking money from Cardioxin while running trials for Novus, that is a massive conflict of interest. And if Novus is paying him through a shell company, they are hiding those payments from the FDA and the shareholders. He is not just a cheating husband. He is a corporate liability." She leaned forward, her expression deadly serious. "Listen to me closely. Zara, you need to document everything, every piece of paper, every receipt. But there is one place you must not go. Do not log into the Novus Meridian system to look for proof." Why, I asked. "I am the compliance officer. It is my job." "Because he is setting a trap," she said. "If he is smart, and psychopaths usually are, he knows this paper trail exists. He needs a scapegoat. If you use your credentials to access these financial records or the clinical data right now, you leave a digital footprint. If this blows up, he will claim you were the one manipulating the accounts. He will say you were the mastermind behind the shell company, or that you were snooping to commit corporate espionage. You stay off that server. Zara, do you understand?" I nodded, but a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I understood, but I also feared it was already too late. The next morning, I was at my desk at Novus Meridian, staring at my dual monitors. The office hummed with the low buzz of air conditioning and typing. It felt normal. It felt safe. Then, a notification popped up in the bottom right corner of my screen. From Legal Department, legalnovusmeridian.com. Subject notification of internal audit. Clinical data access logs. My blood ran cold. I opened the email. It was vague, written in standard corporate legalese. It stated that due to a routine quality assurance check, the IT department would be conducting a forensic audit of all access logs related to the Aegis Flow clinical trials for the past 18 months. Employees were asked to refrain from accessing archived patient files until the audit was complete. It was not routine. I knew the audit schedule. There was no audit planned for this quarter. Lucas had triggered this. He knew I had found the divorce lawyer. He knew I wasn't signing his easy settlement, so he was accelerating the timeline. He was initiating an investigation that he knew would lead directly to the logs he had planted under my name, the logs I had found in his pocket. If the audit found that user Z Cruz had been modifying patient data, and then they found a shell company funneling money, the narrative practically wrote itself. The greedy, unstable wife used her access to falsify data to boost her husband's stock value, then funneled the proceeds to an offshore account. Lucas would play the devastated victim, the brilliant doctor betrayed by his criminal wife. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The walls of the cubicle seemed to be closing in. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of the building before someone from security came to escort me out, but I couldn't leave. If I ran, I looked guilty. I forced myself to sit still. I forced myself to type a reply to a vendor about a shipping delay. I watched the clock on the wall tick by, second by agonizing second. 5:30. I packed my bag slowly. I walked to the elevator. I smiled at the receptionist. I walked to my car. Only when I was on the highway, miles away from the Novus campus, did I let out a breath. I drove straight home. The house was empty. The kids were at a sleepover at Naomi's house, a small mercy. I did not turn on the lights. I went straight to my home office, a small converted bedroom on the second floor. Cassandra had told me not to touch the company servers. She was right. Anything I did online now would be tracked. But she didn't know about my paranoia. She didn't know that for the past 5 years, I had kept a personal, offline backup of the raw clinical data. It was a breach of protocol, strictly speaking. We were not supposed to take data off-site, but I had started doing it years ago, back when I first felt the pressure of the job, the fear that I might miss a compliance error and be blamed for it. I downloaded the raw CSV files onto an encrypted hard drive every Friday afternoon, a digital insurance policy I had never told anyone about, not even Lucas. I pulled the drive from the hollowed-out bottom of a decorative candle on my bookshelf. I plugged it into my personal laptop, ensuring the Wi-Fi was turned off. I was completely off the grid. I opened the file 6 months ago. Then I opened the most recent backup I had taken last Friday, before I had found the phone, before everything had shattered. I placed the windows side by side. I began to run a comparison function, looking for changes in the critical columns, adverse events, and patient status. The code ran for 10 seconds. It felt like 10 years. Then, the screen filled with red highlights. Discrepancies found 12. I clicked on the first one. Patient ID 8904. Original status 6 months ago. Deceased, cause myocardial infarction, secondary to device migration. Current status. Last Friday, withdrawn from study, reason patient relocation. No adverse events reported. I gasped. The sound loud in the quiet room. I clicked the next one. Patient ID 9021. Original status, emergency explant. Cause severe infection and valve thrombosis. Current status active. No adverse events. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely control the trackpad. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about stocks or kickbacks or a midlife crisis affair. Lucas was erasing dead bodies. He was taking patients who had died or suffered catastrophic failures because of the Aegis Flow device, and he was rewriting their histories. He was turning tragedies into clerical errors. He was making the device look perfect, safe, and profitable. And according to the system logs he had planted, I was the one who had done it. I looked at the screen, the blue light illuminating the darkness of the room. I wasn't looking at a divorce case anymore. I was looking at a homicide investigation, and I was the prime suspect. But Lucas had made one mistake. He thought he was the only one who kept records. He thought he was the only one who knew how to hide things. He forgot that before I was his wife, before I was a compliance officer, I was a journalist. And a journalist never relies on a single source. I copied the comparison report to a fresh USB drive. I put the encrypted hard drive back inside the candle. I sat back in my chair and listened to the silence of the house. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt charged. The fear was still there, cold and sharp, but something else was rising up to meet it. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage. He wanted a villain for his story. He wanted someone to take the fall. Fine, I whispered to the empty room. I will play the villain, but I am going to rewrite the ending. I found Dr. Omar Levin in a place that felt like the complete antithesis of the sterile, glass-walled world of Novus Meridian Biotech. We met at a diner called The Depot, tucked away in an industrial park on the south side of the city, nestled between a trucking distribution center and a scrap metal yard. It was 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the sky was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that refused to break. I had not seen Omar in 2 years. The last time I saw him, he was being escorted out of the building by security, holding a cardboard box containing a potted plant and a stapler. Back then, Lucas had rolled his eyes and told me that Omar was burned out, paranoid, and difficult to work with. He said Omar had snapped under the pressure of the deadlines. I had believed him. I had believed my husband because he was Dr. Lucas Hart, and Omar was just a statistician who mumbled in meetings. Now, sitting in a booth with cracked red vinyl seats that smelled of stale grease and bleach, I watched Omar stir a black coffee with a plastic spoon. He looked older. His hairline had receded, and there were deep, dark hollows under his eyes that spoke of chronic insomnia. He wore a raincoat that had seen better days, and he kept glancing at the door every time the bell chimed. "You shouldn't be here, Zara," he said, his voice low. "If Lucas finds out you are talking to me, he will destroy you. He is good at that." "I am not here for Lucas," I said, keeping my hands on the table where he could see them. "I am here because I found a bank account for Heartline Consulting, and I found system logs in Lucas's pocket with my username on them." Omar stopped stirring. The spoon clinked against the ceramic mug. He looked up at me, and for the first time, the fear in his eyes was replaced by a sharp, calculating intelligence. He kept the logs Omar asked. He had them printed out. I said, "In his lab coat." Omar let out a short, bitter laugh. "Of course he did. He is building his insurance policy." He reached down into a battered leather messenger bag on the floor and pulled out a thick manila folder and a silver USB drive. He slid them across the sticky table toward me. "I told them," he said, his voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage. "2 years ago, I told the board. I told the safety committee." I tried to tell the FDA, but the complaint got buried in bureaucratic hell because I didn't have the smoking gun. I opened the folder. It was dense with charts and scatter plots, the kind of raw statistical output that used to give me headaches, but now looked like the Rosetta Stone. "Tell me what I'm looking at," I said. "You are looking at the real Aegis flow," Omar said. "Not the version in the brochures, the version that kills people." He pointed a shaking finger at a column marked Arrhythmia Events. "Early Phase 2 trials," he explained. "The device was migrating. It was slipping just a few millimeters. But that was enough to disrupt the electrical signals in the atrium. We had 7 cases of severe arrhythmia in the first 3 months. 3 of them were fatal. I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. 3 deaths. 3, Omar confirmed. But if you look at the official submission to the FDA, those 3 patients didn't die of device failure. 1 died of natural causes unrelated to the study. 1 was withdrawn for non-compliance, and 1 well. The data just vanished. He flipped the page. After those deaths, Lucas called a meeting. He said the data was too noisy. He said we needed to optimize the signal. That is the word he used. Optimize. It sounds so scientific, doesn't it? It sounds clean. I looked at the spreadsheet. I saw the dates. I checked the audit trail. Omar continued. I wanted to see who authorized the changes, who reclassified a dead man as a dropout. And do you know whose name I found on every single edit? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Mine, yours," he said. "User Z Cruz, level 4 admin." I shook my head. I never did that. You know I never did that. I would never touch clinical outcomes. I handle regulatory paperwork. Omar, I don't even have access to the raw patient database. Omar nodded. I know. That is what I told them. I went to the VP of Operations. I said, Zara Cruz is strictly compliant. Why is she logging in at midnight to change a cause of death code? And do you know what they told me? He leaned in, his eyes intense. They told me I was confused. They said I didn't understand the new workflow, and the next day, I was fired for violating my NDA and creating a hostile work environment. Lucas told everyone I was having a breakdown. He tapped the USB drive, but I am a statistician. Zara, I deal in probabilities and proofs. Before they locked me out, I pulled 2 datasets. One was the server access log, showing user Z Cruz making the edits. The other was the physical security log for the building, the badge swipes. I stared at the drive. You can't be in 2 places at once, I whispered. Exactly, Omar said. On October 14th, user Z Cruz logged in at 2:15 in the afternoon to delete an adverse event report. But the security log shows that your badge, Zara Cruz, swiped out of the parking garage at 1:30 and didn't swipe back in until 8 the next morning. He flipped another page in the folder. And here is the kicker. I traced the IP address of the login. It wasn't from your workstation. It wasn't from the VPN on your laptop. It was from an internal terminal in the executive suite. Specifically, the terminal in the office of the principal investigator, Lucas. And there is one more thing. Omar said, look at the password reset logs. I looked where he was pointing, every single time. About 10 minutes before the illicit edits were made, there was a command issued by an admin account named Admin Ghost. What is that, I asked. It is a backdoor. Omar said, a shadow account. It has root access. It was created to bypass standard IT protocols. Admin Ghost would log in, reset the password for Z Cruz. The edits would be made, and then Admin Ghost would reset your password back to whatever it was before, or simply force a password expiry so you would have to change it the next time you logged in. You would just think the system was being glitchy. You would never know someone had worn your digital skin for an hour. I sat back against the vinyl booth, feeling the blood drain from my face. It was so calculated. It was so mechanical. Lucas had not just used my account. He had built a trapdoor into the system years ago, waiting for the moment he needed to use it. He has been planning this for a long time, I said quietly, since the beginning of the Aegis Flow trials. Omar has corrected. The device was his golden ticket. It was going to make him millions. It was going to make Novus Meridian's stock soar. He wasn't going to let a few dead patients get in the way, but he needed a firewall. He needed someone to take the heat if the FDA ever audited the raw data. And who better than the wife, I said, the bitterness coating my tongue like ash. The wife who works in compliance, the wife who has a history of anxiety, the wife who he can paint as unstable. Omar looked at me with a mixture of pity and hardness. He isn't just divorcing you, Zara. He is discarding the evidence. He is separating himself from the person he framed. If this investigation blows up, and it will, eventually, because dead bodies don't stay hidden forever, he needs to be the shocked husband who had no idea his wife was falsifying data to protect his reputation. He will say you did it out of love, or out of madness, and the logs will back him up. I looked out the window. The rain had finally started, streaking the glass with gray tears. I thought about the text message on his phone. She doesn't know about us. They weren't just talking about the affair. They were talking about the conspiracy. Lila Monroe was the director of digital communications. She controlled the narrative. Lucas controlled the data. And I was the scapegoat. They were fattening up for the slaughter. Omar reached out and placed his hand on the folder, holding it down as if the wind might blow it away inside the diner. I have been waiting for you to wake up. Zara, he said. I knew eventually he would make a mistake, or eventually, you would see the monster behind the mask. He pushed the folder and the USB drive toward me. Take it. It is the original data. It proves fraud, but it also proves you weren't in the building. I took the drive. It felt heavy in my hand, heavier than plastic and metal should feel. What should I do? I asked. Omar looked me dead in the eye, his expression grim. You don't just divorce him, Zara. You destroy him. Because I promise you, if this story breaks and you don't have the full truth ready, you are going to federal prison in his place. I would bet my life Lucas has already drafted the press release expressing his heartbreak over your criminal actions. I gripped the USB drive. I thought of my children. I thought of the perfect White House. I thought of the lie I had lived in for 12 years. Thank you, Omar, I said. He stood up, pulling his raincoat tight around him. Watch your back. Zara, Novus Meridian isn't just a company. It is a machine, and it eats people like us. He walked out into the rain, leaving me alone in the booth with the smell of stale coffee and the evidence that would either save my life or end it. The silence in my home was no longer empty. It was filled with the ghosts of the woman I used to be. For the past 48 hours, I had not slept. I sat in the center of my living room floor, surrounded by the debris of my life, the bank statements, the USB drive from Omar, the printed text messages, and the legal discovery documents Cassandra had expedited. I was not crying. Tears were a luxury for women who were merely heartbroken. I was not heartbroken. I was hollowed out, scraped clean of my identity, and filled with a terrifying, cold clarity. I started looking back, not at the affair, but at us, at the architecture of my marriage. I had always believed Lucas was my partner, my supporter. Now, viewing our history through the lens of the fraud logs and the bank transfers, I saw a different pattern. I saw a man slowly, methodically pruning the branches of my life until I fit into the small, manageable box he needed me to occupy. I remembered the day 7 years ago when I wanted to apply for a position as a senior investigator for a medical ethics journal. It was my dream job. I had the interview lined up. I had my portfolio ready. Lucas had sat me down at the kitchen table. He had taken my resume, a red pen in his hand. You are too talented for this, Zara, he had said, his voice dripping with that hypnotic, reassuring warmth. But think about the stress. Investigative work is unstable. The hours are erratic. Do you really want to be chasing scandals when we are trying to build a family? You are so good at the details. You are so good at the rules. Why not compliance? It is safer. It is steady. You can still protect patients. But from the inside, he had rewritten my resume that night. He had emphasized my skills in data management and regulatory adherence, erasing the parts of me that questioned, the parts of me that dug for truth. He had guided me gently, lovingly, into the role of the compliance analyst, the person whose job is to check boxes, not to open them. Then there was the email. It was a memory that had bothered me for years, a small splinter I had never been able to remove. 5 years ago, a recruiter from The Atlantic had reached out to me. I had mentioned it to Lucas over dinner, excited. 2 days later, when I went to reply, the email was gone, deleted from my inbox. Also deleted from my trash. When I asked him, he shrugged, buttering his toast. I did it for you. Z, he had said, not even looking up. I saw you stressing about it. You were grinding your teeth in your sleep. I didn't want you to feel pressured to take a job that would make you miserable. I was protecting you. I was annoyed then, but I had let it go. I had told myself he cared too much. Now, sitting on the floor, I realized he wasn't protecting me from stress. He was protecting himself from scrutiny. He couldn't have a wife who was a professional investigator. He needed a wife who was buried in the minutiae of his own company's bureaucracy, close enough to be useful, but sedated enough to be harmless. I opened my laptop and logged into the patient portal for Riverstone Heart Pavilion. Since I was a spouse of a senior physician, my care was always processed through the VIP system. I navigated to my own medical history. I scrolled back. 6 years ago. There was an entry I did not recognize. Date March 12th. Provider Dr. A. Sylvan. Psychiatry. Note: patient reports severe episodes of paranoia and anxiety. Chronic stress response observed. Recommended monitoring for potential pharmacological intervention. I stared at the screen. I had never met Dr. Sylvan. I had never reported paranoia. March 12th of that year. I was organizing a charity bake sale for Eva's preschool. I was happy. Lucas had planted it. He had accessed my medical file. Or had a colleague do it, and inserted a false history of mental instability. He had been laying the groundwork for this narrative half a decade ago. I turned to the stack of legal documents Cassandra had procured. These were Lucas's preliminary notes to his lawyer. Hunter. They were supposed to be privileged, but Cassandra was ruthless during discovery, arguing that anything drafted on company time and company devices, which these were, was admissible. I found a handwritten note in the margins of a custody strategy draft. Spouses have a documented history of anxiety and overreaction under stress. See medical file dated March 12th. Can be leveraged if custody is contested. She spirals. She hallucinates crises. The rage that rose in my chest was so hot, it felt like I had swallowed a coal. He wasn't just going to steal my money. He wasn't just going to steal my children. He was going to steal my sanity. He was going to stand up in court, point to a lie he had written 6 years ago, and say, "See, she is crazy. She imagined the fraud. She imagined the danger. She tampered with the data because she was having an episode. He had turned my life into a weapon to be used against me." I looked at the timeline of the text messages again. I placed the phone screenshots next to the printed system logs Omar had given me. The first intimate message from Lila Monroe was dated 14 months ago. Lila meeting with the FDA went well. You were brilliant. Let's celebrate. That same week, the first major data alteration occurred in the Aegis Flow database. The pattern was perfect. Lucas started sleeping with Lila exactly when the clinical trial data began to turn deadly. He didn't just need a mistress. He needed an accomplice. He needed someone in communications who could spin the story, who could distract the media, who could bury the obituaries. He had recruited her. It was a transaction disguised as romance. I went back to the USB drive Omar had given me. I opened the folder labeled Deceased Reclassified. There were 8 names. 8 people who had died because the Aegis Flow device had failed. Their deaths rewritten as administrative withdrawals or lost to follow-up. I scanned the list. Subject 8904, Mary Higgins. Subject 9102, Robert Vance. Subject 9345, Tyler Monroe. I stopped. Tyler Monroe. I looked at the data. Tyler Monroe, age 26, admitted for cardiomyopathy. Implanted with Aegis Flow on February 2nd. Deceased February 4th. Cause of death listed in the real log, massive hemorrhage secondary to device rupture. Cause of death in the official FDA submission, patient withdrew consent. Status unknown, Monroe. I grabbed my phone and opened Instagram. I searched for Lila Monroe. Her profile was public. A curated gallery of high-end dinners, gym selfies, and motivational quotes. I scrolled back past the photos of her at Novus Meridian galas, back past the photos of her promotion. 2 years ago, there was a photo of Lila standing next to a young man in a hospital bed. He looked frail, pale, but he was smiling. He had the same eyes as her. The caption read, "My baby brother, the strongest heart I know. We are going to beat this." Tyler Monroe was her brother. The room seemed to tilt. I grabbed the edge of the coffee table to steady myself. Lucas Hart had killed Lila Monroe's brother with his faulty device. Then, he covered it up. And then, he had hired the grieving sister, seduced her, and turned her into the guardian of the company's reputation. Did she know I looked at the photo of Lila kissing Lucas's cheek in a later post? So proud of this man saving lives. The caption read, "She couldn't know. There was no way a woman would sleep with the man who killed her brother and then help him hide the body." Lucas must have told her a lie. He must have told her Tyler died of natural causes. He must have played the hero who tried everything to save him. He must have manipulated her grief just as he had manipulated my ambition. He was playing with us both. I was the scapegoat, the unstable wife who would take the fall for data fraud. Lila was the shield, The grieving sister turned lover who validated his genius and kept the public asking the wrong questions. He was a conductor, and we were his orchestra of fools. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street of Maple Crest. The streetlights were humming. I felt a strange sensation. It was the feeling of a heavy coat being lifted off my shoulders. For years, I had walked around feeling heavy, feeling dull, feeling like I was failing at being the perfect wife. I had believed his narrative. I had believed I was anxious, lucky to be loved, lucky to be tolerated, but it was all a script he had written. I went to the hallway mirror. I looked at myself. I saw the dark circles under my eyes, but I also saw something else. I saw the sharp angles of my face. I saw the fire my mother had talked about. He thought he had erased me. He thought Zara Cruz was gone, replaced by Mrs. Lucas Hart, the anxious compliance officer. He was wrong. I imagined the future he had planned. I saw the headline in the Maple Crest Gazette, or maybe even the New York Times. Compliance officer, wife of prominent cardiologist, indicted for data fraud. Dr. Hart. I am devastated by my wife's betrayal of my patients. I saw myself in an orange jumpsuit. I saw my children visiting me behind glass, looking at me with confusion and shame, believing their father's story that Mommy was sick, that Mommy did bad things because her brain was broken. No, I turned away from the mirror. I walked back to the living room and looked at the pile of evidence. He had used my login. He had used my name. He had used my life. But he had left his fingerprints everywhere, if you knew where to look. And he had made one fatal error. He had assumed that Lila Monroe was just a starry-eyed girl who would never check the files. And he assumed I was a broken woman who would never fight back. He didn't know that the two women he was manipulating shared a ghost, Tyler Monroe. I picked up the file on Tyler. This was the key. This was the jagged rock that would shatter his glass house. I wasn't going to just divorce him. I wasn't going to just sue him. I was going to introduce Lila Monroe to the truth about her boyfriend. And then, I was going to watch him try to conduct his orchestra when the instruments turned into weapons. I packed the papers into my bag. I needed to sleep. I needed to be rested. Because tomorrow, I had a performance to give. I had to play the role of the oblivious wife one last time, while I arranged the stage for his execution. I turned off the light, leaving the room in darkness. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one holding the match. The meeting did not take place in Cassandra's plush, leather-scented office. It happened in a windowless conference room at the Federal Building downtown, a place that smelled of stale floor wax and intimidation. I had to pass through a metal detector and surrender my phone just to get to the elevator. Cassandra sat next to me, her posture rigid, her briefcase like a shield on the table. Across from us sat Agent Marcus Doyle of the Department of Justice's Healthcare Fraud Unit. Doyle looked like a man who had seen too many people trade their morals for a vacation home. He was wearing a wrinkled gray suit, and his eyes were tired, cynical, and uncomfortably sharp. He didn't offer pleasantries. He opened a file folder that looked disturbingly similar to the one Lucas kept in his safe. Mrs. Hart, Doyle began, his voice gravelly. Let's be clear about your position. According to the digital footprint at Novus Meridian Biotech, you are not just a compliance analyst. You are the primary architect of a conspiracy to defraud the FDA and investors. I felt the blood drain from my hands. I didn't do it, I whispered. Doyle leaned forward. I believe you. My gut says you are the patsy. But juries don't vote with their guts. They vote with evidence. And right now, the evidence says you logged in at 3 a.m. to delete a cardiac arrest report. If we indict your husband today, he walks into court with a stack of logs that point to you. He gets a slap on the wrist for failure to supervise, and you get 10 years for wire fraud. Cassandra intervened, her voice sharp. That is why we are here. Agent Doyle, we are offering you a cooperating witness. Doyle looked at me. I don't need a witness. Mrs. Hart, I need an insider. I need you to stay in the house. I need you to stay in the marriage. And I need you to wear a wire. I shook my head, panic rising in my throat. I can't. I have children. Eva is 11. Nico is 7. If this blows up, if Lucas finds out, Doyle didn't flinch. He slid a piece of paper across the table. This is why you are going to do it, he said. It was a list, a spreadsheet of patient names, dates of birth, and dates of death. These are the people your husband's device killed. Doyle said. Not hurt, killed. There are 14 names here. Zara. 14 families who were told their loved ones died of natural causes, or pre-existing conditions, or bad luck. They were lied to. And your husband signed the death certificates. My eyes scanned the list. I saw names I recognized from the hidden logs Omar had given me. And then, halfway down the page, my breath hitched. Tyler Monroe, age 26, date of death, February 4th, 2 years ago. I looked up at Doyle. Monroe. He nodded. Lila Monroe's younger brother. The room seemed to spin. The connection I had made alone in my living room was now being confirmed by the United States government. Doyle tapped the name. Tyler Monroe was one of the first recipients of the Aegis Flow prototype. He was young, athletic, suffering from a genetic condition. The device was supposed to save him. Instead, it ruptured. He bled out in the ICU. And then I asked, my voice trembling. And then Novus Meridian Biotech swept in. Doyle said, they offered the Monroe family a humanitarian settlement, $2 million. In exchange, the family signed a non-disclosure agreement that is tighter than a drum. They can't sue. They can't speak to the press. They can't even disparage the company privately. I stared at the paper. $2 million to silence a mother grieving her son. But here is the interesting part. Doyle continued. 3 months after Tyler died, his sister, Lila Monroe, applied for a job at Novus. She started in content marketing, low level, but she moved up fast, aggressively fast. Within 18 months, she was the director of digital communications. She has access to everything. I realized aloud. The board minutes, the patient testimonials, the raw footage of the surgeries. Exactly. Doyle said, she is inside the machine that killed her brother. I looked at the photo of Lila I had seen on Instagram, the one where she was kissing Lucas's cheek. Does she know, I asked? Does she know Lucas is the one who covered it up? Doyle leaned back, crossing his arms. That is the million-dollar question. We know she hates the company. We have intercepted chatter that suggests she is leaking info to short sellers, trying to hurt the stock price. She is playing a revenge game. Mrs. Hart, but her relationship with your husband is complicated. He paused, weighing his words. We think she believes Lucas was a victim of the corporate pressure too. The narrative Lucas spins to everyone that he fights for patients against the bean counters, he has probably fed that to her. She might be sleeping with him because she thinks he is her ally. She thinks they are taking down the evil corporation together from the inside. She doesn't know that he is the one who personally reclassified her brother's death as a withdrawal. I felt a strange, twisted kinship with the woman who was destroying my marriage. We were both sleeping with the enemy, and we both thought we were the ones in control. She is a loose cannon, Cassandra warned, reading my expression. Be careful. Zara, do not think she is your friend just because she is a victim. A woman who sleeps with a married man to get revenge on a corporation has a flexible moral compass. If she finds out you are working with us, she might view you as collateral damage. She might burn you to get to the board of directors. Doyle nodded. You need to watch her. If she decides to blow this up prematurely, before we have the hard evidence on Lucas, the whole case collapses. Novus lawyers will bury the data, and Lucas will walk away clean. We need to control the detonation. I walked out of that meeting with a recording device taped to my chest and a new understanding of the battlefield. That night, I sat in the dark of my bedroom, the blue light of my phone illuminating my face. I went back to Lila's Instagram. I stopped looking at the selfies and started looking at the captions. 6 months ago, a photo of a sunset over the Novus Meridian headquarters. The caption read, "The higher the tower, the longer the shadow. But the sun always rises. Justice Patience." 4 months ago, a picture of a broken heart locket. Some hearts stop beating, but they never stop speaking to us, listening to the silence. For Ty, she was screaming in plain sight. And nobody saw it because she was pretty and blonde and worked in PR. She was hiding her dagger in a bouquet of hashtags. She wasn't just a mistress. She was a suicide bomber waiting for the right moment to pull the pin. And she was using my husband as her detonator. 2 days later, I attended the product launch for the new generation of the Aegis Flow device. It was held in the atrium of the Riverstone Heart Pavilion, a soaring space of glass and steel. Waiters circulated with champagne. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. I stood near a pillar, wearing a black dress that faded into the background. I was the wife. I was the prop. Lucas was on the stage, bathed in a spotlight. He looked magnificent. He was speaking about innovation, about courage, about the sanctity of life, and standing just off to the side, in the shadows of the wings, was Lila. She was wearing a red dress that looked like an open wound against the dark curtains. She was watching him. Her expression was unreadable to the room, a look of professional admiration. Perhaps, but I saw the tightness in her jaw. I saw the way her hand clenched her phone. She wasn't looking at a lover. She was looking at a target. Lucas finished his speech to thunderous applause. He beckoned Lila onto the stage to acknowledge the communications team. She walked out, smiling, radiant. She took his hand. The crowd cheered. The flashbulbs popped, blinding and rapid. And in that moment, amidst the applause, Lila looked out into the audience. Her eyes scanned the room, past the donors, past the board members, and locked onto me. We stared at each other across 50 feet of expensive carpet. She smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. It was the smile of the woman who had sent me the text. She doesn't know about us, but I didn't look away. I didn't look down. I held her gaze, and for a second, I let the mask slip. I let her see the cold, hard resolve in my eyes. I know. My eyes said, I know about us. I know about Tyler. And I know about the bomb you are standing on. Her smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. She sensed something, a shift in the air pressure. Lucas squeezed her hand, beaming at the camera, oblivious to the fact that he was standing between two women who both held the power to end his life. One with a text message, and one with a federal indictment. I took a sip of my champagne. It tasted like iron. Let them take the pictures. I thought, it would make a hell of a before photo for the crime documentary. The mediation room at Hunter and Pike smelled of lemon polish and intimidation. We sat at a long mahogany table that seemed designed to make everyone feel small. On one side sat Lucas and his shark of a lawyer, a man named Sterling who wore a suit that cost more than my first car. On the other side sat me and Cassandra. I kept my head down. I let my shoulders slump forward slightly, mimicking the posture of a defeated woman. I stared at my hands, twisting my wedding band, which I still wore, a calculated prop, while Sterling slid a document across the polished wood. Dr. Hart is being generous, Sterling said, his voice smooth and oily. He is offering you the house equity, 60%. He is offering full tuition for the children. In exchange, he wants a clean dissolution of assets, no deeper forensic accounting, no dragging out the process. He wants to move on. I looked up at Lucas. He was checking his watch. He looked bored. He looked like a man dealing with a nuisance parking ticket, not the end of a 12-year marriage. I just want it to be over, I whispered, making my voice tremble just enough to be convincing. I am tired of fighting. Lucas, I just want to make sure the kids are okay. Lucas softened, but it was a condescending softness. That is all I want too. Zara, sign the agreement. Let's put this behind us. Cassandra kicked me gently under the table. It was our signal. We will review the final draft, Cassandra said, pulling the papers toward her. But in principle, Mrs. Hart is inclined to agree. She is fragile right now. She does not have the energy for a court battle. I saw the corner of Lucas's mouth twitch upward. He thought he had won. He thought his gaslighting campaign had worked, that he had crushed my spirit so thoroughly I would sign away my rights just to stop the noise. He didn't know that while I was playing the part of the broken wife, Cassandra was filing a motion for discovery that afternoon, demanding every email, text message, and calendar entry from his work accounts under the guise of establishing his travel schedule for custody arrangements. We walked out of the office, and for the first time in months, Lucas actually touched my shoulder. "You are making the right choice." "Z," he said. I forced a weak smile. "I hope so." I got into my car and drove 2 blocks before pulling over. I checked my phone. A message from Doyle. "Discovery motion filed. We are casting the net." The next few weeks were a masterclass in compartmentalization. Lucas took my capitulation as a green light to bring Lila Monroe into the periphery of our lives. He started bringing her to soccer games. He didn't introduce her as his girlfriend yet, just a colleague from work. But the way she lingered near him, the way she handed Nico a Gatorade with a familiarity that made my stomach churn, spoke volumes. One Tuesday, I sat in my car in the school parking lot, watching through the windshield. Lucas was standing by the fence, laughing. Lila was next to him, holding 2 ice cream cones. She handed one to Eva. Eva hesitated, looked at her father, and then took it. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. That was my daughter. That was my life she was stepping into. Wearing her designer heels and her innocent smile, I wanted to get out of the car and scream. I wanted to tell Eva that the woman buying her chocolate chip ice cream was helping her father erase dead people from existence, but I didn't move. I took a picture with my phone. Evidence of integration into family life, Cassandra had called it. Useful for later. But right now, it served a different purpose. It made Lucas feel safe. It made him feel like the transition was happening, that I was accepting my replacement. Let him get comfortable. Doyle had said, "Arrogance is where they make mistakes." Behind the scenes, the investigation was moving with the lethal precision of a surgical strike. I met Doyle and Omar in the basement of a public library 3 towns over. We laid out the map of the conspiracy. We had the Heartline consulting contract, which Cassandra had unearthed during the initial financial sweep. It linked payments directly from Novus Meridian to Lucas's shell company. We had the IP logs Omar had saved, but we needed a bridge. We needed something that connected the technical fraud to Lucas's conscious intent. We needed him to say it. Doyle slid a small device across the table. It looked like a fitness tracker. "It is a smartwatch," he said, "but the microphone has been modified. High gain, long battery life. Get him talking." Zara. 2 days later, I found my opportunity. Lucas had come to the house to pick up some winter coats for the kids. He was in a good mood, humming to himself as he rummaged through the hall closet. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, looking anxious. I let my breathing hitch. Just a little. "Lucas," I said. He stopped, holding a parka. "What, I am worried," I said, wringing my hands. "I got an email at work today, a generic compliance reminder. What if they check the logs? What if they see my name on those files? You said it was just a cleanup, but I am scared. If they audit the system," he sighed. The sound of a parent dealing with a slow child. "Zara, stop spiraling. We talked about this. But the timestamps." I pressed, my voice rising in pitch. I wasn't even there. "If they check the badge swipes." He walked over to me, dropping the coat. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip firm, authoritative. "Listen to me," he said, looking deep into my eyes. "You are being paranoid. The system is watertight." I had Bennett in IT scrub the metadata. He created a loop in the server. If anyone looks, it traces back to a corrupted batch file, not a specific terminal. And Bennett is on the payroll. "Zara, he knows who butters his bread." "Bennett," I repeated, making sure the watch on my wrist caught every syllable. "You are sure he fixed it?" Lucas laughed. A cold, sharp sound. "Bennett would fix a murder scene if I paid him enough. The logs are done. It is over. Stop acting like a crazy person, or people will start treating you like one." He patted my cheek, picked up the coat, and walked out the door. I waited until his taillights disappeared. Then I tapped the screen of the watch. Recording saved. I sent the file to Doyle. 24 hours later, Doyle was sitting in a judge's chambers with a warrant application. The name Bennett was the key. It unlocked a specific subserver in the Novus IT department. When the FBI digital forensics team quietly mirrored that server remotely, they didn't just find the scrubbed logs, they found the email chains. They found the correspondence between Lucas and Lila. Subject narrative control, from L. Monroe to L. Hart. If the press gets wind of the cluster in the Phase 2 group, we need to pivot. We frame it as user error or pre-existing comorbidities. I have drafted a statement. We need to make sure the internal data matches the external story. Can you ensure the outliers are quarantined in the system before the quarterly report? From L. Hart to L. Monroe. Already handled. My wife's login is useful for grunt work. If it blows back, she is the perfect shield. History of anxiety, overwhelmed by the job. It writes itself. Just keep the reporters happy. It was grotesque. It was a detailed roadmap of their collusion. Lila wasn't just a girlfriend covering for her boyfriend. She was the PR architect of the cover-up. But the final nail came from the boardroom itself. Doyle had managed to turn a mid-level executive assistant at Novus, a woman named Sarah, who had been passed over for promotion by Lila 3 times. Sarah had placed a recording device under the conference table in the main boardroom before a scheduled emergency meeting. I sat in Doyle's unmarked van, wearing headphones, listening to the live feed. The audio was fuzzy, but the voices were distinct. I heard from the CEO, Helena Cross. I heard the legal counsel, and I heard Lucas. They were discussing the rumors of an DOJ inquiry. We need to cut ties with the consulting firm. Helena said, it is too messy. And what about the data discrepancies, the lawyer asked. I heard Lucas's voice, clear and arrogant. Don't worry about the data. If the feds come knocking, we have a containment strategy. The logs are all under Zara Cruz. We paint her as a rogue employee. She was unstable. She was trying to boost my metrics to save our marriage. She acted alone. If she makes noise, we show the logs. It is her login. Done. Done. The word hung in the air inside the van. He had just confessed to a conspiracy to frame his wife. He had signed his own professional death warrant. Doyle took off his headphones. We have him, he said quietly. We have them all. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt triumphant. But all I felt was a cold, burning need to see the look on his face when the walls came down. Then, the notification pinged on my phone. An email from the internal communications team at Novus, sent to all employees. Subject celebration of excellence. We are proud to announce that Dr. Lucas Hart has been named Physician Innovator of the Year. Please join us for the annual gala this Saturday at the Grand Hotel Ballroom, where Dr. Hart will receive this prestigious honor and share his vision for the future of cardiac care. I stared at the screen, Innovator of the Year, for a device that killed people, for a career built on fraud and the corpse of his mistress's brother. I looked at Doyle. When do you move? I asked. We are preparing the indictments now. Doyle said, we were planning to arrest him Monday morning at his office. Quiet? Controlled? No, I said. Doyle looked at me. Zara, we need to secure the assets. I don't care about the assets. I said, my voice hard. He wants a stage. Let's give him a stage. Let him walk up to that podium. Let him take the award. Let him think he has won everything. And then, take it all away while the cameras are rolling. Doyle hesitated. It is risky. It could cause a scene. Lila Monroe is the director of communications. I said, she invited the press. She wanted the world to see him. Let's give her exactly what she wants. Doyle looked at me for a long moment, studying the set of my jaw. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said. Saturday night, I went home. I walked up the stairs to the bedroom I used to share with Lucas. I stripped the bedsheets. I laid out the documents on the mattress. The Heartline bank statements, the system logs with my name, the death certificate of Tyler Monroe, the emails between Lucas and Lila, the transcript of the boardroom recording. I took a yellow highlighter and began to draw lines, connecting the money to death, connecting the death to the cover-up, connecting the cover-up to the affair. Every line led back to one person, Lucas Hart. He believed he was the hero of this story. He believed he was the brilliant doctor held back by a mediocre wife. He believed he would stand on that stage on Saturday and be worshipped. I capped the highlighter. I lay down on the bed, next to the paper trail of my husband's crimes. I closed my eyes and pictured the ballroom. I pictured the lights. I pictured the moment the applause would stop. Break a leg. Lucas, I whispered into the dark. The Grand Hotel ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, vibrating with the low hum of expensive conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes. I walked in alone. I was wearing a floor-length black gown with a high neck and long sleeves. It was severe. It was architectural. 2 years ago, when I tried it on for a charity dinner, Lucas had wrinkled his nose and told me it looked too funereal. He said it was too aggressive for a doctor's wife. He told me to wear beige silk instead. Tonight, aggressiveness was exactly the point. I was not here to celebrate. I was here to mourn the man my husband pretended to be. I stood at the back of the room, deep in the shadow of a velvet curtain, and watched the performance begin. 3 hours earlier, the scene had been very different. In a soundproof conference room on the 42nd floor of the Novus Meridian headquarters, the atmosphere had been suffocating. Agent Doyle sat at the head of the table. To his right sat Helena Cross, the chairwoman of the board, a woman who was known in the biotech industry as the Ice Queen. To her left was the company's general counsel, looking pale and sweating through his starch. Doyle did not shout. He simply laid out the papers. "Here are the checks to Heartline Consulting," Doyle said, sliding the copies across the glass table. $400,000 in kickbacks from a competitor. Helena picked up the paper. Her face remained impassive, but her knuckles turned white. "And here," Doyle continued, "are the system logs, the real ones, and the ones Dr. Hart falsified using his wife's credentials. We have the IP trace. It came from his terminal." He paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle. "And here are the emails between Dr. Hart and your director of communications, Lila Monroe, discussing how to bury the adverse event reports, specifically, the death of Tyler Monroe." Helena looked up then. Her eyes were cold, calculating. She was not looking at a scandal. She was looking at a necrosis that needed to be amputated to save the body of her company. "If we wait for the indictment," Doyle said, "Novus Meridian is complicit. If you act tonight, you are the victim. You are the company that rooted out the corruption." Helena closed the file. She looked at her watch. "The gala starts in 2 hours," she said. Her voice was like a guillotine blade. "Let him accept the award. Let him stand in the light. And then, I will turn it off." Back in the ballroom, the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd of 500 donors, investors, and medical luminaries. A spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the stage. Lucas stood there. He looked like a god. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, his hair swept back, his smile dazzling and humble all at once. Holding his hand was Lila. She was wearing a dress the color of fresh arterial blood. It was a bold choice. It was the exact shade of the lipstick kiss emoji she had sent him in that first text. "She doesn't know about us. They look like the power couple of the future. They looked untouchable." The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor, stepped up to the podium, and now, for our highest honor, the Physician Innovator of the Year Award. For his groundbreaking work with the Aegis Flow device and his tireless dedication to patient safety, please welcome Dr. Lucas Hart. The applause was thunderous. I watched people I knew, neighbors, colleagues, friends, stand up and cheer. Lucas squeezed Lila's hand, kissed her cheek, a public declaration he had been saving for tonight, and stepped to the microphone. Lila stepped back slightly, beaming at him with a look of adoration that I now knew was a complex cocktail of love, ambition, and complicity. Lucas gripped the award, a heavy glass sculpture of a heart. He looked out at the crowd. He looked straight at the camera broadcasting the live stream. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This award is not for me. It is for the patients." I felt bile rise in my throat. "In this industry," Lucas continued, leaning into the mic, "we talk a lot about data. We talk about compliance. But compliance is not just paperwork. It is not just checking boxes. It is a matter of conscience. It is looking a family in the eye and telling them you did everything possible. That is the standard I hold myself to every single day. Next to me, a waiter poured wine for a guest. He didn't notice my hands were clenched into fists so tight my nails were cutting into my palms. The audacity was breathtaking. He was quoting the very morals he had butchered, using them to polish his ego. He finished his speech. Thank you to Novus Meridian for believing in the vision, and thank you to my partner in this journey, Lila, for helping me tell the truth. The applause roared again. Lucas smiled, basking in it. He looked ready to step down, to go to the after-party, to celebrate his victory. But Helena Cross was walking onto the stage. She did not clap. She walked with a fast, predatory stride. She took the microphone from the stand before the MC could return. The room quieted down. Sensing a deviation from the script, Lucas looked confused. He half turned to her, keeping his smile fixed in place. Thank you. Dr. Hart, Helena said. Her voice echoed through the silent ballroom. It was amplified, crisp, and devoid of warmth. Lucas nodded, expecting a tribute. However, Helena continued, Tonight is a night for truth, and in the spirit of the transparency Dr. Hart just spoke about, the board of directors has a duty to share a critical update. The silence in the room stretched thin, tight as a wire. As of 5 o'clock this afternoon, Helena said, looking directly at the camera, Novus Meridian Biotech has received credible, substantial evidence regarding the falsification of clinical trial data for the Aegis Flow device. A gasp rippled through the crowd. It sounded like all the air was being sucked out of the room at once. Lucas's smile froze. It didn't disappear. It just calcified, turning into a rictus of terror. We have also uncovered evidence of financial irregularities involving kickbacks from competitor firms. Helena went on, relentlessly. Consequently, effective immediately, Dr. Lucas Hart is suspended from all clinical and administrative duties. We have turned over all findings to the Department of Justice and are cooperating fully with the federal investigation. The camera flashed, once, twice, then 100 times. The room exploded into white light. Lucas stood there, holding his glass heart. He looked like a statue that had just cracked down the center. He turned to Helena, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. From the side of the stage, 4 men in dark suits emerged. They did not run. They walked with the terrifying calm of inevitable consequences. Agent Doyle was in the lead. He walked up the stairs. He did not pull out handcuffs, not yet. He simply stepped into the spotlight, next to the man who had just been hailed as a hero. Dr. Hart, Doyle said, his voice picked up by the podium mic. My name is Agent Doyle with the Department of Justice. We would like to invite you to accompany us to answer some questions regarding wire fraud and the violation of the False Claims Act. The live stream was capturing every second. I knew that in homes across the city, people were watching. Naomi was watching. The neighbors were watching. Lila, who had been standing frozen in her red dress, suddenly moved. Her survival instinct kicked in. She stepped forward, placing herself between Doyle and Lucas, grabbing the microphone. This is a mistake, she said, her voice shrill, cracking under the strain. She looked at the audience, desperate to spin the narrative she had carefully constructed. This is a misunderstanding. Dr. Hart lives for his patients. He has saved thousands of lives. This is a corporate smear campaign. She looked at Helena, her eyes pleading. You can't do this. You know how hard he works. Helena Cross looked at Lila Monroe. She looked at her with the disdain one reserves for a stain on a silk carpet. Ms. Monroe, Helena said, leaning toward the mic so the whole room could hear. We will also need to speak with you, specifically regarding your coordination of the public statements surrounding the patient fatalities. Lila flinched. Fatalities. We followed protocol. We need to discuss the concealment of the death of Subject 9345. Helena said. Lila blinked. Who? Helena paused. She let the name hang in the air for a second. Heavy and absolute. Tyler Monroe. The name hit Lila like a physical blow. She staggered back a step, her heel catching on the carpet. The color drained from her face, making the red dress look violent, grotesque. "Tyler," she whispered, "but he died of complications. It was the disease," Lucas said. She turned to Lucas. Lucas was not looking at her. He was staring at the floor, his face gray, refusing to meet her eyes. In that refusal, she saw the truth. She saw the lie he had fed her for 2 years. She saw the manipulation. She saw that she wasn't his partner. She was his cover-up. The room was deadly silent. The only sound was the high-pitched whine of a camera flash recharging. Lila looked around the room, wild-eyed. She looked for an exit. She looked for an explanation. And then, her eyes found the back of the room. She saw me. I stepped out of the shadows of the curtain. I stood in the light of the exit sign. I was too far away to speak, but I didn't need words. I looked at her. My face was calm. I raised my hand slightly, holding my phone. Lila stared at me. She saw the black dress. She saw the lack of surprise. And in that instant, the realization hit her. She knew that I knew. She knew that I wasn't the oblivious wife at home checking spreadsheets. She knew I was the one who had given the file to Helena. She knew I was the one who had brought the feds to the stage. Her phone buzzed in her hand. I saw her look down at it. I had just sent the photo. The one on the kitchen table. The one with Tyler's real death certificate next to Lucas's signature. Lila looked at the screen. Then she looked at Lucas. Then she looked back at me. The devastation on her face shifted. It hardened. The grief turned into something sharper, something dangerous. She dropped Lucas's hand. She stepped away from him, leaving him alone in the center of the stage with the federal agents. Agent Doyle placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Dr. Hart, if you would come with us." Lucas let himself be led away. The glass award left sitting on the podium, abandoned. But I wasn't watching him. I was watching Lila. She stood there in her blood-red dress, shaking, tears streaming down her face, staring across the ballroom at me. We were no longer enemies. We were 2 women who had just watched the same building burn down. And as she looked at me, I saw a silent message pass between us. "You win," her eyes said. I turned around and pushed open the heavy doors of the ballroom. The cool air of the lobby hit my face. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the marble floor, leaving the chaos, the cameras, and the ruins of the Hart family legacy behind me. The ballroom had turned into an aquarium of sharks. I could hear the shouting even from the heavy service doors. Flashbulbs were still popping like strobe lights in a nightmare disco. Inside that room, Helena Cross was doing damage control, trying to amputate Lucas from the company body before the infection spread to the stock price. Reporters were shouting questions at Lila, at the patients, at anyone who looked like they held a secret, but I was not there. I was 3 floors down. In the concrete silence of the parking garage, the air here was cold and smelled of gasoline and damp cement. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that happens after a bomb goes off, but before the dust settles. I was leaning against the hood of my car, holding a phone. It was not my phone. It was Lucas's, 10 minutes ago. Amidst the confusion of the agents securing the stage, I had asked Agent Doyle for a small mercy. I told him I needed to copy the contact numbers for the children's pediatrician and the school emergency line before they took the device into evidence. Doyle, usually so rigid, had looked at me. He saw a wife whose world had just imploded. He nodded and gave me 5 minutes. He did not know that 5 minutes was 4 minutes longer than I needed. I unlocked the screen. The passcode was still the year we were married. He was so predictable. I opened his messages. There were a dozen unread texts from panicked board members, from his lawyer, from his broker. I ignored them all. I opened the thread with Lila Monroe. Her last message to him, sent 2 hours ago, was a heart emoji. I typed. My thumbs moved with a steady, lethal rhythm. I did not tremble. The adrenaline that had been coursing through me all night had crystallized into ice. Get away from the hotel. Now. I hit send. I imagined her upstairs. She would be on the balcony by now, escaping the suffocating heat of the accusation. She would be shaking. She would be lighting a cigarette, her hands trembling, the red dress looking like a bloodstain against the gray city skyline. She would see the notification. She would think he was protecting her. She would think he was still the hero, telling her to run while he took the heat. I waited exactly 10 seconds, long enough for hope to flicker in her chest. Then I typed again. She doesn't know about us. Huh? I added a single emoji. The cold, smiling face. I hit send. I could practically see the scene unfolding upstairs like a movie playing on the back of my eyelids. Lila was staring at the screen, the confusion, the sudden, sickening drop in her stomach, the realization that the voice on the other end was not the man she loved, but the woman she had mocked. I opened the photo gallery. I scrolled past the pictures of our children, past the pictures of his awards. I found the image I had taken days ago, the masterpiece. It was a photo of my kitchen table. The lighting was stark. In the center of the frame was the folder labeled Subject 9345. Next to it was the death certificate of Tyler Monroe. Next to that was the internal memo regarding the humanitarian payout to the Monroe family. And right next to the cause of death, which had been altered in red pen, was the signature, L. H. Lucas Hart. I attached the photo. I hit send. Up on that balcony, Lila would be opening the image. She would be zooming in. The pixelated text would sharpen into a blade. She would see the name, Tyler Monroe. She would see the checkbox marked SAE, Serious Adverse Event Device Related. She would see the handwritten note in the margin. In the handwriting she knew better than her own reclassify as lost to follow-up, per LH. She would stop breathing. The cigarette would slip from her fingers and fall 40 stories to the street below. She had spent 2 years sleeping with the man who killed her brother. She had spent 2 years helping him polish the reputation of the device that stopped Tyler's heart. She thought she was fighting a system. She thought Lucas was the victim of corporate greed. Just like Tyler. Now she knows. Lucas was the system. He was the one who signed the paper. He was the one who decided Tyler was worth more dead and silent than alive and problematic. I typed one last message. He didn't just lie to my face. He lied on your brother's death certificate. Still think I don't know about you, sent? I watched the status change from delivered to read. I put the phone down on the hood of the car. My work was done. In the makeshift interrogation room off the ballroom, the scene was shifting. Lucas was sitting at a metal table, his tuxedo jacket draped over the back of the chair. He looked small. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a sweaty, terrified middle-aged man. Agent Doyle was sitting across from him. The phone on the table buzzed, and buzzed, and buzzed. Lucas looked at it. He recognized the vibration pattern. He reached for it, but Doyle's hand slammed down on the table first. "Leave it," Doyle said. Doyle picked up the phone. He tapped the screen. He read the messages. He looked up at the one-way mirror on the wall. He couldn't see me, but he knew. He knew exactly what I had done. He saw the text warning Lila to run, which proved Lucas's intent to obstruct justice, but he also saw the photo. He saw the dismantling of the alliance. He looked back at Lucas. "You really should have changed your passcode." "Doctor," Doyle said dryly. The door to the interrogation room opened. Lila Monroe walked in. She was a wreck. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks in black, jagged lines. Her hair was coming loose from its intricate updo, but her eyes were dry. They were terrifyingly clear. She didn't look at Lucas. She walked straight to Doyle. "I want a deal," she said. Her voice was like grinding glass. Lucas stood up. "Lila, wait. Don't say anything. They are trying to trick you." She turned to him. It was a slow, deliberate movement. She looked at the man she had protected, the man she had loved, the man she had betrayed me for. "You signed it," she whispered. Lucas blinked. "What, you signed the reclassification?" she said, her voice rising to a scream. "You told me it was the disease. You told me Tyler's heart was too weak. You signed the order to hide it. Lila, please." Lucas stammered, reaching out a hand. She slapped his hand away. The sound echoed in the small room like a gunshot. "I want to testify," Lila said to Doyle, never taking her eyes off Lucas. "I know where the backups are. I know where the original trial data is hidden, and I want that photo entered into evidence." Doyle nodded slowly. "Have a seat, Ms. Monroe." Lucas slumped back into his chair. He put his head in his hands. He knew it was over. The scapegoat had walked away. The shield had turned into a sword. Down in the garage, I picked up my own phone. I sent a short text to Cassandra. "It is done." I walked toward the elevator, but I didn't press the button for the lobby. I walked past it to the escalator that led out to the street level. I could hear the sirens approaching in the distance. They were coming for Dr. Lucas Hart. They were coming for the Innovator of the Year. I stepped onto the moving stairs. I watched the concrete floor of the garage recede. I felt the cool night air hitting my face as I ascended. I checked my reflection in the glass panel of the escalator. I didn't see Mrs. Hart. I didn't see the anxious wife. I didn't see the victim. I saw a woman who had walked through fire and came out holding the match. I reached into my purse and pulled out my wedding ring. It was heavy. It was platinum. It was worth more than my first year's salary. I looked at it one last time. Then, I dropped it into the trash can at the top of the stairs. I walked out of the hotel doors and into the city night. The air smelled of rain and exhaust and freedom. I hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. I realized I didn't have a home to go back to. The house in Maple Crest was a crime scene now. My marriage was a case file. "Take me to the airport," I said. I didn't know where I was going yet. Maybe I would go see the ocean. Maybe I will go back to journalism school. Maybe I would just sleep for a week. But as the taxi pulled away from the curb, leaving the flashing lights of the police cars behind, I knew one thing for certain. My name is Zara Cruz, and for the first time in 12 years, the story belongs to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please leave a comment below telling us where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Zara's revenge. Don't forget to subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit that hype button so we can share this story with even more people.